Hello, I'm Melanie Figg. I'm going to read a few poems from my poetry collection, Trace. Trace won the Many Voices Project Award and was published in the fall of 2019 by New Rivers Press. Many of my book promotional events, including being a featured reader and workshop leader at the 2020 Gaithersburg Book Festival, have been canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. So I'm happy to be part of this virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival reading. The first poem is called Preparing the Sacraments. My mother took care of the gardens. That's what a minister's wife does. Her gardens circled the church. Foxglove, bleeding hearts, snapdragons, larkspur, delphinium, black-eyed Susans. Sarah and I helped her weed. Pull it up slow near the ground or you'll break it off at the stump. She took the trowel and unhooked our failures until we learned to watch and follow her. I sat next to the flowers in the basement kitchen. She placed each stem slowly in the 2 silver vases that became more important as she carried them to the altar, set them carefully between the candles, stepped back to make sure they were just right. Then my mother laid out the vestments. While she ironed the linens, I straightened the hymnals and the books of common prayer. Red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. I wove through the rows. Quiet, me making the only sound. Fresh flowers and my mother in the sacristy ironing. Each Saturday like this. I hummed hymns or talked to myself as I ordered. The sun pressing through the west windows, pews, flowers, candles, organ, pulpit, all mine. I got down on my knees and slowly tasted that sour bite. Lemon oil, sweat, oak, my own young faith. Not in the man with the lamb, not in the God who watched me undress, not even in the familiar flowers made holy by the cross between them, but in my mother, ironing in the sacristy, singing. This next poem is called The Trace of Nothing. I watched a young girl walk on Green Lake. She braced herself against the rope her mother offered and moved easily above dark, mean water. I spent my youth forgetting the animal way I curled up to you, then to shame and set adrift. The mind cannot believe, the body will not obey. A green film crawls over me, moist and determined as memory, as the middle of the lake is mottled, patched in darker blue and silver, as if the lake had bodies moving through it, dark and thoughtful, trying to find a way back, a reason to pull it ashore. All they found of the schooner was a cabin door floating north. I'm told I should be glad, grateful. This is what art is made from. So the artist paints her naked body perfectly into the background of industry. And so you scan the rusted iron wall and you overlook her. You often do. You overlook her until she begins to move very, very slowly and eventually steps away. And we are left again with the wall, with where she was. And then, of course, the wall is left, transformed. But not a trace left of her. And the wall reminds us of nothing. Or the trace of nothing. Remember? Breathe a slow breath through the mouth and stare off to the right. Remember? This is how I conjure you. This is how we talk. This next poem is in 2 sections. It's called How History Rises to Greet Us. 1. Yaya Boffman. A swarm of swallows releasing from a tree, waving a thick, liquid cape, shifting in 2 directions, never quite back on itself, barely catches my eye. I am 8. Don't let your bike wheels off the gravel. Don't touch the dirt that touches her yard. Yaya feeds squirrels, pigeons. She chews soup bones. She's German. Her husband died in the Nazi war. She doesn't come to town. All her dogs are strays. 5 of them are stuffed and mounted with glass eyes, their mouths stitched perfectly closed with black thread from the 5 and 10. 5 falls later, stretching before softball practice, beyond where the big boys grunt and swear, in the bad field next to the river. We hear her screen door slam. The river carries the noise to us. She comes out, stands in her yard, and throws her head back, her arms waving at the scrimmage. Bent over ourselves, we stop counting and stare while her wailing stutters and climbs, and everything is war. She is back there and trapped, and somehow her body has brought her here alone to a drafty house full of lost animals. What is it that determines? An old neighbor touched both me and my sister, and she and I. 2. Off a bus called Special, stone steps lead to the desert. In the days before the trip, she loses all of her teeth. She holds her hand in front of her speaking mouth. When she cries out in labor, the doctor slaps her face. "Shut up, you stupid yellow bitch." They fill an oil drum with small, carefully picked stones, a Japanese character written on each. It will be years before a rancher digs it up and unnumbs his afternoon, but that is not now. Now is truckloads of Sears and Roebuck's catalogs, powdered milk, Hopi walking past. When they leave, broken china floors the desert. I could tell you another story, a simplified version of this. Within days of the atomic blast, fields of lush flowers sprang up. Chrysanthemum, iris, crocus, daffodil. How beautiful, some still say. God must forgive us. This next poem is called Weighing the Dead. Prop them on scales, the nearly, the terminal, hopeless. Write that number down. At the moment, how to tell of such a small, invisible place, of death over before you can see it, certainly say she's passed on, over, away, sliver of a second, switch, button, the flash when the coyote realizes the cartoon cliff is through, then he is, and air returns to its usual properties. Sift, surround, disavow. The body reaches over its own gap, and in that gasp lightens. The soul weighs some heartbreaking fraction of an ounce. Less than nothing turns the whole machine. What does grief weigh? The present absence, the here and now. When she first died, my body tried to disappear. But a year later, the hollow was too much to bear, and food does a good job at filling. I want to believe the body solves its own longing for peace, if only through confusion. What does hunger weigh? This next poem is, I'm going to read an excerpt from a long poem that's indebted to David Meisel and his Library of Dust, which is a collection of terrific photographs of corroded copper canisters, of inmate remains from the Oregon State Hospital Museum of Mental Health in Salem, Oregon. It was the state hospital where One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was filmed, and it's one of many Kirkbride buildings. Many thanks to the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County that awarded me a grant to travel to Salem and do some research to complete this long poem. This is just the beginning section of it. Leaving a trace. As a girl, I pressed my hand into the cool, wet cement of our new cellar stairs, trusting to endure. Again, the Oregon State Insane Hospital is moving thousands of copper canisters of cremated remains, decades of inmates, decades diagnosed and dismissed, worries about sex and worries about money. The flooded canisters reacted with the human ashes held within. 3,400 lives confined, forgotten, ignored, out of sight, reacting. Patients distinguished now by the unique corrosion of their containers, the mark of time and body chemistry. How to matter after years of neglect, decades and centuries. Spirits unresting after a lifetime of disregard. The public is outraged, finally, and there are articles and amendments. The scholars show off in the abandoned journals of Babel. So often language unpersons. I want to write a place to store unspeakable things, to contain and drain the unremembered. Your pain can become nothing here. Not ignored, not invisible, nothing. 1. The library. A flooded basement of copper canisters, and the artist saw chemistry, oxidized surfaces turned green. The basilica's dome ages so elegantly against all varieties of sky. He imagined palettes of epic ache and beauty. Envision a dazzle so dazzling they could become micro-terrains with his camera-like eye. With decades of neglect, ashes of the dead combined with their housing to create intensely hued colors of blooming minerals, astral movements rainbowed slick on the river, unique now as ever, ever after. We put my mother's ashes in a handmade ceramic urn that was too small. The mortician put what remained into an empty aspirin bottle with a child-proof lid. We opened the plastic lip and scattered her on the Michigan farmland where she grew up. Her body, fine powder, sticky, with bits of small bone, took to the wind, our forearms, the seams in our shoes. In no time, the once elegant hospital overfilled with the neglected and lost, a monstrous vine extending to the 4th floor ward, a ladder for no one to climb, no one's to be canistered and unclaimed. In an outbuilding, past the cemetery that no longer was, 3 deep on pine shelves, the bodied canisters, each stamped with a number for a name in a book somewhere. 354, 251, 1,886, and now would be photographed, made into art after decades dusted by prisoners from the local penitentiary. Such strange chemistries emerging between human and metal. We are all made of stardust, the scientists tell us. Of course, copper, metal of millennia, metal of the goddess, able to resist corrosion. First comes cuprite, that earth blood red that builds character and protects from further corrosion, but then years of flooding with mean water and bacterial action. The canisters break down, as any of us would under such pressure, and shock treatments sometimes 3 times a day. Scrubbing clean any dream, any doubt, leaving no trace of before, once it was, will and memory tamped down, neural pathways dead-ended, and the body drastically altered to bear witness to the mind's stumping and chemical violations. And then the gorgeous azurite and malachite. Walking the halls of J Building, another polishes the floor with her calluses, shivering in a labyrinth of medication and lousy memory. The invisible shine in their remove. Some wards are abandoned, some house violent criminals. Before that, the incurables, the maniacs, the melancholics, the misfits, the alcoholics, the syphilitics, the sad and inconvenient. Do you have family like that? I do. In 1896, orphans visited to cover their tombstones with flowers. Wards of the state spinning through time, constellations of charity. We are all made of stardust, the romantics tell us. This last poem is a prose poem I wrote, and it's based on the myth of Persephone. It's called After She Returns. I used to think I earned my keep by deceit, waiting for crocuses to crack this world open and take me back. I used to believe I deserved that bed like a sanctified vice, and me just a child. I wanted to be dead. But I had a lot of time to think in those winters without snow. I know I was there for more than the endless kegs of pomegranate wine I nursed in my sadness those first few years. More than the stitching I lost myself in, weaving the same pattern over and over and over. So easy to remember there. At first I thought the memories were dreams, bats swooping at my hair. But memory saved me. History washes the dead. It was easy to make him think what he wanted to believe, that his belt across my back could break me or make me his. I volunteered nothing. Once he was asleep, I passed his shoes lined up like law, and we went to rub the dead with warm, scented oils. The last odors of home were released, and we sat quietly together in lamplight. Thanks so much for listening.